Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we will continue our discussion from the previous class. Okay, I have uploaded the notes. Yes, you are asking something? Uploaded the notes in the portal MS Teams in our class. So gas turbine jet propulsion 21, which we had started discussing in the previous class, and then the subsequent notes for today's class and ongoing discussion. So you can download these notes because these are scanned in a better way. The previous class what I have shown was not scanned in a proper way. So we were discussing about axial flow compressors. Okay, and we had noted that please switch off your mic if you don't have any question. Switch off your mic if you don't have any question. Some sound is coming. So we have noted that axial flow compressors are mostly used or in most jet engines, axial flow compressors are used because of some of their advantages. What are the advantages? Is that the flow direction is suitable for multi-staging. Second is that the cross-sectional area is less for a given mass flow rate as compared to centrifugal compressors. Okay, and although the pressure ratio is less, we can increase the number of stages to generate large pressure ratio. Okay. And then we had seen how it looks like, how the axial flow compressor looks like, and how it rotates. So we have alternate stages or alternate, you can say, devices which are rotating, and then a static part, again a rotating part, a static part, like this. So combination of a rotating and static part is known as a single stage. The rotating part is called as rotor, static part is called as stator. So these things we have discussed. Okay. All the rotors are mounted on the shaft, on the hub on the shaft. From here, they are mounted on the hub on the shaft. So these are all part of the rotor. These are the rotor blades. Okay. And the stators are mounted on the casing on the other side. As we have seen in the schematic diagram, the stators are mounted on the casing, rotors are mounted on the shaft. Okay, so the nature of flow is that the flow passes through the rotors, it gains kinetic energy, and also some rise in static enthalpy occurs. Then it passes through the stator, and the excess kinetic energy that has been gained is converted to rise in static enthalpy. Whenever I say rise in static enthalpy, it is always, remember, always accompanied by rise in static pressure and static temperature. Static enthalpy rise means static temperature rise, and from that you can calculate what is the rise in static pressure. So rotor increases the static temperature as well as the static enthalpy as well as the kinetic energy, and stator reduces the kinetic energy, means uses the extra kinetic energy gained, and increases the static enthalpy further. Okay. Same thing is repeated again and again for each stage that we have discussed. And the flow pattern is kept similar so that the design is easier for each stage. Okay. So for a single stage, we have seen how the flow pattern looks like. Okay, in terms of drawing something called velocity diagrams, which are very important. So in some cases, there may be some inlet guide vanes present. In some cases, like mostly for jet aircraft, the inlet guide vanes are not present. Okay, to reduce the mass of the engine. So in case the inlet guide vanes are not present, the flow at the inlet of the first rotor comes in a straight line, like C1 is a straight line, alpha 1 is 0. In case inlet guide vanes are present, the flow is rotated at a, so the only function of the guide vanes is to rotate the flow in a certain direction. It does not input any work or change any enthalpy or anything else. In case velocity C1, where the axial component of the inlet velocity is CA1 and the tangential or wheel component is CW1. Okay. And then we have seen that in the rotor, because there is change in blade angle from beta 1 to beta 2, and because u remains constant, the velocity, actual flow velocity from the velocity triangle can be seen to increase significantly. So C2 is much larger than C1. It means that the kinetic energy has increased significantly. Okay. So this is the function of the rotor. Then this flow with an angle of alpha 2 and velocity C2 enters the stator. Okay. So this angle alpha 2 and at C2, like at an angle alpha 2 and velocity C2, it enters the stator and again goes out at angle alpha 3 and velocity C3. To keep the same orientation again and again, generally this alpha 3 and C3 are by design kept equal to alpha 1 and C1, so that again in the next rotor stage the inlet conditions are similar, C1 and alpha 1. Okay. So in case the inlet guide vanes are not present, for the first stage the orientation will be different because alpha 1 will be 0. But for all the subsequent stages, for the rotor the angle will be alpha 1, means some value alpha 1. And for the stator exit it will be alpha 3 equal to alpha 1. Okay. So only the first stage angles will be different. First stage rotor blade design will be different. After that all the other stage designs will be similar in case the inlet guide vanes are not present. In case inlet guide vanes are present, even the first stage angles are also similar. Okay. So we denote all the absolute velocities by C1, C2 and relative velocities by V1, V2. Okay. And these things we have already noted. And we also have designed in a way so that the axial velocity remains constant, and we will call it as CA. Okay. So the cross-sectional area is changed in such a way so that for the constant mass fluid the axial velocity remains also constant. And you can notice the cross-sectional area change here. Okay, the cross-sectional area is changing. So mass fluid remains same, axial velocity remains same. Because density is increasing, you reduce the cross-sectional area. And there can be different designs for that cross-sectional area. Either you decrease the root diameter, tip diameter, or you increase the root diameter, or you change both of them so that the cross-sectional area is suitable. And from the velocity triangle, let me just keep this. So velocity triangle we have to refer to again and again. So we have to keep this open. All discussion is with respect to velocity triangles. Okay, this is the inlet triangle, this is the outlet triangle. Beta 1 and beta 2 are called blade angles, alpha 1 and alpha 2 are called as flow angles. Okay, beta 1, beta 2, which are the rotor blade angles, are called blade angles. Alpha 1, alpha 2, which are the stator blade angles. Stator inlet angle is alpha 2, stator outlet angle is alpha 1, are known as flow angles because they are the absolute flow angles. Based on this, we have derived some equation where u is equal to Ca tan alpha 2 plus tan beta 2, which is also equal to Ca tan alpha 1 plus tan beta 1 just by geometric calculation. Okay, and we have defined a coefficient called flow coefficient phi in terms of design parameters u, and we can write phi in terms of angles. That's okay. So again, you don't have to remember these derivations. Okay, you just need to remember what is flow coefficient and how to draw the velocity triangle. After that, everything you can just calculate based on the velocity triangle. You need not remember all these things. If you can draw the velocity triangle correctly, and only thing is to remember is that while drawing the velocity triangle is that beta 2 will be less than beta 1 and u is constant. So automatically everything will be easy to remember. So once you know that beta 2 is less than beta 1, you know that this point is shifted to the left. Okay, and u is same. So it means that alpha 2 has to be greater than alpha 1. So only thing you need to remember is beta 2 is less than beta 1. Okay. And u is equal. So anyway, So from the above equation, we have found that tan alpha 1 minus tan alpha 2 is equal to tan beta 2 minus tan beta 1. Okay. So the change in angles is given by this relation. Tan beta 1, or you can write in the opposite way, tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 is equal to tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1. Okay. Just these are some relations which may be useful for solving problems. So the work done we have calculated in terms of change in the angular momentum, which is given in terms of velocity in the wheel direction and change in wheel component. Okay. So this per unit mass flow, this can be written as u Cw2 minus Cw1. U is the velocity in the flow in the rotational direction, wheel direction. Cw2 minus Cw1 is the change in wheel component of the velocity, of the flow velocity in the wheel direction. So this can be written as UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1 or UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2. Okay, in terms of either the blade angles or the flow angles, we can represent the work input that is required for the compressor. Okay, this is the work input that goes into the gas. Actually, work input required is slightly larger because of losses, as we will see later. Okay, so up to this point we have discussed. Any questions?
No, sir.
So we'll continue. Okay, so let us try to understand how the TS diagram looks like for this. Okay, or what are the location of the points 1, 2, and 3 in the TS diagram. What are these 1, 2, and 3? 1 is the inlet of the rotor, 2 is the outlet. So you can see from the angles also alpha 1, beta 1. So inlet of the rotor is denoted by 1. Outlet of the rotor or inlet of the stator is denoted by 2, and outlet of the stator is denoted by 3. Okay. So 1 is the inlet of the rotor, 2 is the outlet of the rotor or inlet of the stator, and 3 is the outlet of the stator. Okay. So at the inlet of the rotor, what is the typically what will be the kinetic energy? Let me increase the size of this. Later we will go to the relation because this diagram is very important. Okay. At the inlet of the rotor, okay, what will be the typically what will it be high or low? The kinetic energy?
It will be low.
It will be low. Okay, it is coming from upstream side, generally from the diffuser or from the atmosphere. So kinetic energy will be low. Okay, if it's an industrial gas turbine, it's coming from the atmosphere at a very low velocity. If it is aircraft engine, then it is coming from the diffuser at a low velocity. Okay, so as a result, there is not much difference between static and stagnation enthalpy or temperature. Okay, so if we write this static condition at point 1 as this denoted by 1, okay, at pressure P1, let this be pressure P1. So static temperature is T1, okay. Then stagnation temperature is T01, okay. So remember always that temperature and enthalpies are related by Cp into delta T. Delta H is equal to Cp into delta T, okay. So stagnation temperature is T01 and the stagnation pressure is P01. How are T01 and T1 related? What is the distance between T01 and T1? What is the length of this line in the TS diagram?
And that kinetic energy.
Kinetic energy by Cp, okay? Because it is temperature. If it was enthalpy, it will be kinetic energy. Because it's temperature, T01 minus T1 is equal to which velocity will be considered here?
Ambient velocity.
No.
Like at outlet of diffuser, whatever little we have.
Yes, so it is the inlet of the rotor. Okay, it is the inlet of the rotor. If there are no inlet guide vanes, so we are drawing for the rotor and the stator. Okay, ignoring the inlet guide vanes. So it is equal to C1. Okay, C1 is the inlet velocity to the rotor, right? C1 is the inlet velocity to the rotor. So whether inlet guide vanes are present or not, C1 is the inlet velocity to the rotor. So this is T01 minus T1 is equal to C1 square by 2Cp. Is it clear to everyone? this distance
Yes, sir.
T01 minus T1 is equal to C1 square by 2 Cp, where C1 is the actual velocity at the rotor inlet, right? Or is there any confusion? I hope there is no confusion. Okay. So at the same point, we can denote the static condition as 1 and stagnation condition as 0, 1. Okay. How will you find P01 pressure if P1 is known?
Adiabatic equation P01 by P1 equal
As
to
isentropic equation. Don't confuse between isentropic and adiabatic. Okay. Isentropic equation. Yes, isentropic equation. Because process for this you need to use the isentropic equation, otherwise pressure will be reduced. So typically P01 and T01 are known from calculation, and we have to calculate P1 and T1. Okay, it's the opposite way around. The total pressures are known after the diffuser, as we will see later. Okay, so if you know the total temperature, you can calculate the static temperature based on T01 minus C1 square by 2 Cp, which will give you T1, and then P1 can be calculated from P01 using the isentropic relation. Now after the stator, after the rotor, how much is the, what will happen to the enthalpy, total enthalpy? So in the rotor, what do? We input lot of work, right? The function of the rotor is to impart work to increase the stagnation enthalpy, overall enthalpy, to increase the energy of the fluid. Okay. Now this energy can be increased in terms of kinetic energy as well as static energy, but the net result is that stagnation energy is increased. Okay, stagnation enthalpy is increased, and you can just use first law to calculate that. So first law will give you H02 minus H01 is equal to W, where W is the work input. Is it clear to everyone? These things we have discussed repeatedly. First law. Okay. So H02 will be much higher than H01. It means that T02 will be much higher than T01. Okay. So say this is the T02 point. Okay. And pressure is P02. And if the process is has friction, instead of going straight isentropically, we'll go towards the right hand side. Okay. We have reached the right hand side and reached the pressure P02 and temperature T02 after the rotor. At this point, what is the kinetic energy of the fluid? After the rotor, what is the kinetic energy of the fluid?
Like C2 square by 2.
2 Cp. Kinetic energy C2 square by 2, correct. C2 square by 2, correct. So the distance between T02 and the static temperature T2 should be equal to C2 square by 2 Cp, right? And because C2 is quite larger than C1, this distance will be quite large, right? As compared to this distance. So the point 2 is below this point 02, but at a much lower distance. Okay, this is the static temperature 2. Okay. So what happens is that the static temperature increases. Some diffusion is occurring. Okay. So the entire work input does not go in changing the kinetic energy. We also have increase in static temperature. But the kinetic energy is also increased, as you can see here. So what is the rise of static temperature? It is T2 minus T1. And what is the rise of kinetic energy? It is given by this C2 square minus C1 square. C2 square by 2 minus C1 square by 2. Okay. So which can be seen from this graph. So now in the stator, what happens to the stagnation enthalpy? There is no work input and no heat output or heat input. So what does first law tell us? First law of thermodynamics. Stagnation enthalpy is constant. Okay, so H03 is equal to H02 or T03 is equal to T02. But because of frictional losses, the pressure actually is reduced slightly. Okay. So although the stagnation temperature remains same, as you can see here, the pressure actually is reduced from P02 to P03. So we go from this 02 point to 03 point in the stator. These are the stagnation properties. What is the kinetic energy of, or what is the flow velocity at the stator exit? Quick.
Like at 3, what is the velocity that we
Yes,
have to take?
so what we have discussed previously, what is the velocity as 3? C3 should be equal to C1. Okay, this we have discussed that by design C3 is taken equal to C1. Okay, in the previous class we have discussed. So this is again C1, right? C1 square by 2, C3 square by 2, which is equal to C1 square by 2 Cp. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this distance is similar to this, means that kinetic energy has again reduced. Okay. So the stagnation enthalpy has not changed. T02 and T03 are same point, but because the kinetic energy has reduced from the previous large kinetic energy, what happens to the static enthalpy? It increases. So now the new static enthalpy is H3 and the new static temperature is T3. Okay, T3 minus T2 is given by this change in kinetic energy. Okay, so this shows the points, static and stagnation points corresponding to the rotor inlet, rotor exit and stator exit or a axial compressor stage. Any questions regarding this? I will reduce the size so that the entire document is clear.
Sir, you said about losses, frictional losses. Do you repeat once again that part?
Yes. Where is the zoom here? So both rotor and stator will have some frictional losses because flow is passing through the rotor and stator passages, right? So if there are frictional losses and there is no work input and heat output, or heat input and work output, what does first law tell us? So frictional losses are, there are no separate terms for in the first law. Okay, so a stagnation enthalpy remains constant even if there are frictional losses. So H02 remains equal to H03 in the stator. Okay, but what changes because of frictional losses? The entropy will increase, right, because of frictional losses. So the entropy at point 2, whatever was the entropy, at point 3 the entropy will be higher. Okay, so we will be shifting towards the right hand side. Although the stagnation properties remain same, stagnation temperatures. Okay, so because we are shifting to the right hand side, for the same stagnation temperature, the pressure is reduced. Okay, and this is also apparent because frictional losses are there. The pressure will get reduced. Okay, there are some pressure losses because of friction. Okay, temperature does not decrease, stagnation temperature does not decrease, but pressure decreases. As a result, you shift towards the right hand side and you can see that keeping the stagnation temperature same, the pressure is reduced from P02 to P03. Okay, so this is the effect. This is due to the effect of friction. If there are no frictional losses, where will be the point 03 if there are no frictional losses?
102.
At
On
point
0. And where will be the point 3?
higher than 2.
Higher than 2. On the same line 2 to 02, but higher than 2. Okay. So this is the actual case. Ideal case 03 will coincide with 02, but 3 will be higher than 2. Okay. So I think now it's clear. So now let us quickly. So once you know this concept, better to know this. Even without knowing this, also you can just go through the velocity diagrams mechanically and solve the problem. This gives a lot of clarity. Okay. So what was our aim? So our aim was to calculate the. So ultimately, the aim of any compressor is to change the pressure, increase the pressure. So our aim is to calculate the pressure rise and temperature rise. Okay, from temperature rise, we will calculate the pressure rise. So we already calculate the work input in terms of blade or flow angles. We will try to relate this to the pressure rise. Okay. So how will we do this? Let the overall temperature change, stagnation temperature change in the entire stage starting from before the rotor to after the stator is delta T. So delta T is equal to T03 minus T01, which is also equal to T02 minus T01 because T03 equal to T02. Okay. So now T02 minus T01 is the work input in the rotor. Okay. So work input in the rotor we have already calculated. It is UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2. Okay. So we will replace this. Okay. So T02 minus T01 is work input by Cp. Work input is Cp into delta T, right? So delta T is equal to W by Cp. So UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 by Cp. Okay, this is the change in stagnation temperature across the entire stage or across the rotor also. Now, if we know the isentropic efficiency of the compressor, isentropic efficiency is still defined in the same way for the overall compressor stage. Isentropic efficiency is T03S minus T01 by T03 minus T01. Okay. So if you go from 01 point straight to pressure P03, the temperature here is T03S. Okay. And the actual temperature is T03. Okay. So the actual process, if you combine both rotor and stator, the actual process is from 01 to 03. But the ideal process is from 01 to 03S. Okay. So isentropic efficiency is T03S minus T01 by T03 minus T01, like we have defined previously. The only thing that has changed is that instead of just drawing the line straight from 01 to 03, we are dividing into two steps, 01 to 0. But the overall goes from 01 to 03. So now based on the isentropic efficiency, we can write T03S minus T01 as just rearranging the term, eta C T03 minus T01. Why we are writing in this form? Because we can use this T03S to calculate the pressure. Okay. So if you take T01 common, you get T01, T03S minus T03S by T01 minus 1. And on the right hand side, you replace T03 minus T01 with this term. Okay. UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 by Cp. Eta C was already there. So now replacing T03S by T01 by the pressure ratio using isentropic relation. T03S by T01 is equal to P03 by P01 to the power gamma minus 1 by gamma. We can write P03 by P01 as 1 plus eta C UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 Cp T01 whole to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. Okay. So this is the relation of the change in the stagnation pressure or the effect of compressor in a single stage. Okay, if you want to calculate the pressure ratio for a single stage in terms of design parameters like blade angles, blade velocity, and axial flow velocity, inlet conditions, then isentropic efficiency, all these are design parameters. So you will get what is the pressure ratio. Obviously, you can calculate the temperature ratio from previous calculation itself because you directly the temperature ratio. So a few points which we can note here is that we cannot indefinitely increase the pressure ratio P03 by P01. Our aim is to increase the pressure ratio, right? Because so that we can have less number of stages. But to increase the pressure ratio, either we need to increase isentropic efficiency, which is not in our hand, which will depend on how the products are manufactured, how good is the surface quality. It is improving over the years, but cannot be considered as a design parameter. We can design with a larger value of U, okay, so that the rotation is faster, RPM is high, so that U is larger. But there is a limit which is governed by the centrifugal stages. You cannot just keep on increasing the blade speed, okay. So you cannot arbitrarily increase U, okay. The maximum value of CA, which is the axial component of this C1, okay, is governed by the inlet Mach number. You cannot indefinitely increase the maximum velocity because then the flow will become sonic at this inlet section. Okay, so maximum velocity is governed by the flow Mach number. So you want to keep it low value. Okay, so based on some rule of thumb. So C also indefinitely increased, and Cp and T01 are not in our control, and gamma is also not in our control. So the only thing that can be changed to increase pressure ratio is the change in angle from beta 1 to beta 2. you have a large change in angle from beta 1 to beta 2, you will get higher pressure ratio. Okay. If you have a small change in angle from beta 1 to beta 2, you will get less pressure ratio. However, we have discussed in the previous class that you cannot have a very large change in angle from beta 1 to beta 2 because flow is against adverse pressure gradient, and if there is a huge change in angle, there is chance of flow separation. Okay. So high deflection in rotor blades increases the losses and is not recommended. So you limit the change in angle beta 1 to beta 2 also to a certain amount. So tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 is also up to a certain limit. Okay, value is up to a certain limit, and that limits the overall pressure ratio. Okay. So this is how we can calculate. So I have given some problem in the assignment sheet, and I will suggest some problem in the next class from the book if some additional problems are present. If I can find some additional problems which you can solve, but go through the problems in the assignment sheet after today's class so that you know how to solve these things. Okay. How to find the pressure ratio for a stage based on, so instead of blade angles, if flow angles are given also, you can find the pressure ratio. Okay. So now one important thing is that, so I will just keep this expression for work open here. Okay, we have discussed that the work input is to the fluid is UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2. Okay, or delta T can be written as UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 by Cp. Okay, so in real life, the actual work input, actual work done on the fluid is slightly less as given by the ideal equation. Okay, ideal equations give us that UCA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 by tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2 is the work done on the fluid, but actually the work done is slightly less, and there is a reason for it. Okay, so this is denoted by defining a factor which is known as work done factor. Okay, omega, work done factor, which has a value less than 1. Okay, slightly less than 1. This has a value slightly less than 1, and I will discuss this by what is the physical significance of this parameter. Okay. So what happens is that in the flow passage, when the flow enters, so flow passage means this area between the tip and the root section. Okay, this is the flow passage between the blade tip and the blade root. Okay, the flow enters with a constant velocity. Ideally, it should be equal to Ca. Okay, like we have done. But in actual case, what happens due to boundary layer effects at both the edges? Okay, the velocity tries to go towards a somewhat like a fully developed flow profile. Okay, instead of having a static profile like this, like a straight line profile, it tries to go towards somewhat like a fully developed profile. Okay, so at the center the velocity increases, at the edges means at the tip and the root the velocity decreases, because it is like flow through a channel, somewhat like that. Okay, flow through the annular region, and this gets exaggerated if you go on increasing the number of stages. For the first stage it is almost equal to Ca, the velocity at the tip and the root at the mean everywhere it is equal to Ca. But if you go to second stage, it is slightly more different from Ca. For the third stage, it is slightly more different. Ultimately, it reaches a more fully developed like profile like this. Okay, somewhat like this profile, actual velocity profile. I have shown here fourth stage, but it will be similar for the subsequent stages also. It won't change much after this fourth or fifth stages. So remember, we have done all the calculations till now for the mean blade diameter. Okay, so we have done the calculation with mean blade diameter where we have assumed that velocity is Ca. But in actual cases, the velocity Ca is also means velocity, actual velocity is changing. Okay. So without going into details, I will just state what is the effect of this. So because of this, what happens is that the actual work input to the fluid gets reduced from the ideal equation. Ideal equation is derived based on the assumption that everywhere the actual velocity is Ca. Okay, but in actual case the actual velocity is not Ca everywhere. It is greater than Ca at the center and less than Ca at the tip and the root. Okay, like you can see here. So for the first stage the deviation is not much. So we can assume a very high value of work done factor. Okay, it is almost equal to ideal case. So omega is around say 0.98, 0.99 for the first stage. For the second stage, it is slightly decreased, so it can be 0.93, 0.94, depending on the design. For the third stage, it again is reduced. Okay, so like this, it will keep on decreasing, and will reach around 0.8 value like this for the subsequent stages. So this change in the work done factor omega with respect to number of stages is given like that. So it will start with a high value and gradually it will go towards a lower value, like around 0.8. It will not go to 0 or something like that. Still lot of work will be generated or inputted to the profile, but it will keep on decreasing. Okay. So we have to keep this in mind. If it is not mentioned, we can assume that it is equal to 1. But in real design, this also plays a part. Okay, so actual velocity profile also plays a part, and we have to take into account the work done factor. I have given a problem. I think the work done factor should be there in there. Otherwise, you have to take into account the work done factor. Another important point is there. These are all minor points related to the calculation of the pressure ratio that we had discussed just now. Okay. So in the rotor also diffusion is occurring, right? I had stated that in the rotor also diffusion is occurring. What do I mean by diffusion? Diffusion means that the static temperature and pressure increases in the rotor also. Okay, means there is some compression effect in the rotor also. And this change in the static temperature and pressure in the rotor, can somebody tell me how is T2 minus T1 related to the velocity diagram? How is, let me open this, okay. This is the velocity diagram. Can we write T2 minus T1? How can we write T2 minus T1 in terms of velocity?
Sir, like V1 reduces to V2, right?
Yes, yes.
So that
Correct.
is what's causing the diffusion.
Yes. So if you are sitting on the rotor, very good. If you are sitting on the rotor, so with respect to the rotor now, it will seem like everything is static because you are sitting on the rotor. Okay, you are moving with the rotor. So from your point of view now, the rotor just acts like a diffuser. Flow comes in with a velocity v1 because you are sitting on the rotor. From your viewpoint, flow comes in with velocity v1 and goes out with velocity v2. Just like the stator, but it is rotating, but you cannot notice it because you are sitting on the rotor. So from the reference point of rotor, moving reference point, the inlet kinetic energy is half v1 square and the outlet kinetic energy is half v2 square. And this difference gives rise to the static temperature. So T2 minus T1 is half V2, half V1. T2 minus T1 is half V1 square minus half V2 square. Or T1 plus half V1 square by 2, sorry, Cp will also be there. T1 plus V1 square by 2 Cp is equal to T2 plus V2 square by 2 Cp. Okay. Your point is absolutely correct. So the change in temperature is due to reduction in the relative kinetic energy, relative velocity. Okay, this is what is causing the diffusion. And how this change occurs? Because we change the passage area in the rotor also. So the passage area in the rotor also is changed.
But
so
work
that it acts
will
like a
also be
diffuser.
added, sir.
Yes.
But work done will also be added, no, sir.
Work done is also getting added. So both functions are going on. So rotor is acting like a diffuser plus work done is also added. As a result, the kinetic energy is also increasing. If the work done was not added, kinetic energy could not have increased. Okay, because both are there, both the static energy, static enthalpy plus kinetic energy is increasing. Okay, so both functions are there. As a result, you get large increase in kinetic energy as well as increasing static enthalpy. Okay. What were we discussing? Okay, so this diffusion cannot be arbitrarily high in the rotor. Okay, again due to the reason that you cannot, because the flow is again the adverse pressure gradient, it causes large losses. So maximum diffusion is limited by an empirical relation. Okay, maximum diffusion can be given in terms of V2 by V1. If you reduce V2, it means that diffusion is more. Means if you reduce V2, it means that you are increasing the static temperature. Okay, so but you cannot reduce the V2 arbitrarily. You cannot design with a very low V2. So there is a limit which tells that V2 by V1 should be greater than equal to 0.72. This is known as d'Huller's criteria or d'Huller's numbers, and this states empirically that V2 by V1 should be greater than equal to 0.72. So whenever we design some centrifugal compressor, we have to note that V2 should be greater than 0.72 of V1. Otherwise, there is large chances of separation and adverse means separation and large losses. Okay. So there is a, so if V1 is known, the minimum value of V2 that can be designed is 0.72 into V1. If you go lower than that, there are chances of losses, and that automatically limits the beta 2 and the change of angle from beta 1 and beta 2, because this change of V2 from V1 is related to beta 1 and beta 2. If Ca is constant, V1 is nothing but Ca by cos beta 1. Okay, V1 cos beta 1 is Ca. So V1 is Ca by cos beta 1 and V2 is Ca by cos beta 2. Okay, so if V2 by V1 is related, then cos beta 2 by cos beta 1 are also related. Okay, so there is a limit. So this criteria is also important in many cases in actual design problems. Maybe in the problems we take in the class it may not be important, but for actual designs these are important. So we will move on to the continue this. Change the notes. Okay. To some other important parameters. Okay, till now what we have discussed, we have found how to calculate the work input to a stage, how to calculate the pressure ratio, temperature rise, and then some parameters we have seen like work input factor, work done factor, and D'Huller's criteria. Okay, the final important parameter for designing axial compressors is known as degree of reaction. Okay, it's also very important parameter, this degree of reaction. So this again I will keep these diagrams open here only, although it looks small. If you have a laptop it should be visible. On mobile it will be difficult to see. This degree of reaction gives us an idea about how much diffusion is occurring in the rotor as compared to the entire stage. Okay, so for the entire stage some diffusion is occurring. What do we mean by diffusion? Okay, let us go to the velocity, this temperature diagram. TS diagram. The static temperature rises from T1 to T3. Okay, so this is the entire extent of static temperature and static pressure rise. Pressure rises from P1 to P3. This is the main function of the compressor. Okay, so over the entire stage, the static temperature rises or enthalpy rises H3 minus H1. Okay, and static temperature rises T3 minus T1. And in the rotor, it is T2 minus T1, and in the stator, it is T3 minus T2. So this degree of reaction tells us what part of this T3 minus T1 comes from the rotor. Okay, whether more of this comes from the rotor or less part comes from the rotor, whether T2 minus T1 is very large as compared to T3 minus T1, or whether T2 minus T1 is very small as compared to T3 minus T1. This is given by the definition of degree of reaction. Okay, so formally we can define R as static enthalpy rise in the rotor, which is H2 minus H1 by static enthalpy rise in the entire stage, rotor plus stator, okay, which is H3 minus H1. If Cp is constant, we can write H2 minus H1 as Cp minus T1 and H3 minus H1 as Cp minus T1. So Cp gets cancelled. So R is equal to T2 minus T1 by T3 minus T1. Okay. So again, I will reiterate that it gives us the physical significance is that it gives us an idea about how much diffusion is occurring in the rotor itself with respect to the entire stage. Okay. So if the value of R is 1, R is half. If the value of R is half, so then where is the point 2 located? What is the temperature 2 or R is half?
Like midway between 1 and 2.
Midway between 3 and 1, correct. And it means that the diffusion in the rotor is equal to the diffusion in the stator. T3 minus T2 is equal to T2 minus T1. Okay, so both have similar diffusion. Okay, we will discuss later that this is beneficial. If R is half, T3 minus T2 is equal to T2 minus T1, and this is beneficial because the diffusion, total burden of diffusion, is divided equally between the rotor and the stator. Okay, so in this case the losses are minimum, means least losses occur when T3 minus T2 is equal to T2 minus T1 or R is half, because equal diffusion. So both the diffuser and both the stator and the rotor have low amount of diffusion. In case R is not half, say R is large or small, say 0.8. In that case, huge amount of diffusion will occur in the rotor and very small in the stator. So losses in the stator will be small, but in the rotor there will be huge loss. Okay. On the other hand, if R is very small, say R is 0.2 or 0.1, the change in rotor is very small. Okay, T2 minus T1 is small. So the losses in the rotor is small, but the losses in the stator will be very large. Okay, because large change in velocity occurs. So ideally R is kept equal to half or near about half if it is possible for gas turbines. Unlike steam turbines, where we have discussed also a lot about R is equal to 0 cases, which are called as impulse turbines. Okay, here we don't use impulse turbine in jet engines. Okay, although we studied briefly in the last class, but we don't use impulse turbines. Okay, so for the sake of completeness we will study, but all turbines are reaction turbines. Reaction turbines are turbines. This is compressor we are discussing, but we will discuss similar thing for turbines also, where this diffusion or burden of diffusion or the expansion in for case of turbine is divided both in the rotor and the stator. Okay. So in these cases, R is kept between 0 and 1, typically around half, nearby half. Okay, this is for the compressor. Similar thing can be discussed for the turbine later on. Okay. So if we assume Ca is constant, so we'll just derive quickly some expression and then we'll take a break. If Ca is constant, we'll take some assumptions. Ca is constant and C3 equal to C1. We have already assumed this. Okay, so T3 minus T1 can also be written as T03 minus T01 as C3 equal to C1. Okay, so T03 is nothing but T3 plus C3 square by 2Cp, and T01 is T1 plus C3 square C1 square by 2Cp. So T3 minus T1 is equal to T03 minus T01. Okay, now Cp into T3 minus T1, which is the work done. Okay, means actual work done is Cp T03 minus T01, but because it is equal to T3 minus T1, I can write it Cp into T3 minus T1 is equal to UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1. We have derived this. Okay, somewhere we have derived this. UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1 is work done. Okay. So now let us take delta TA to be the static temperature rise in the rotor. Means this T2 minus T1, let us call it as delta TA, just for ease of or simplification of calculation. And delta TB is the static temperature rise in the stator. So T3 minus T2 is delta TB. Okay, delta TA is T2 minus T1, delta 3B is T3 minus T2. Okay, so work done is the Cp into delta TA. Okay, Cp into delta TA, static temperature rise in the rotor. Okay, Cp into delta 3A plus change in kinetic energy in the rotor. Static temperature rise in the rotor, Cp into delta TA plus change in kinetic energy is half C2 square minus C1 square. Is this line clear to everyone? Why W is Cp delta TA plus half C2 square minus C1 square? Should be clear from this diagram. Okay, T3 minus or see T02 minus T01 is equal to W. Okay, and T02 is nothing but T03. So T03 minus T01 equal to W. Okay, and T03 minus T01 can be written in two parts. One part is this one, change in static temperature, which is Cp into delta TA, and then the change in the kinetic energy. Okay, which is half C2 square minus C1 square. So we are just taking the difference between this 02 and 01. Okay, the difference here is this difference plus this minus this length. Okay, plus this length minus this length. So Cp delta TA, change in static enthalpy plus change in kinetic energy, half C2 square minus C1 square. Okay. Now from the velocity diagram, C2 can be written as, what is C2? C2 cos alpha 2 is Ca. Okay, C2 cos alpha 2 is Ca, or C2 is equal to Ca by cos alpha 2 or Ca sec alpha 2. Similarly, C1 cos alpha 1 is equal to Ca, or C1 is equal to Ca by cos alpha 1, which is Ca sec alpha 1. Okay, So now we can write this as CPTA, this part. Okay, CP delta. So we are trying to find out what is delta TA in terms of other parameters. Okay. CP to delta TA is equal to W minus half C2 square minus C1 square by taking this to the other side. What is W? We have already written W as UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1. Okay. CP delta T is equal to UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1 minus half C2 square minus C1 square. So what is half C2 square minus C1 square? We can write half C2 square, C2 as CA sec alpha 2 and C1 as CA sec alpha 1. So if you write that, it will become half CA square, you can take CA square common, sec square alpha 2 minus sec square alpha 1. There is a reason for writing this. We want to write everything in terms of tan alpha 2 and tan alpha 1 to ease the calculation. Okay. So CP delta TA is equal to UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1 minus half CA square tan square alpha 2 minus tan square alpha 1. Why this is tan square alpha 2 minus tan square alpha 1?
Like that trigonometric identity is there, right?
Sec square alpha is equal to 1 plus tan square alpha, right? So based on that we can get, so sec square alpha 2 is equal to tan square alpha 2 plus 1. Sec square alpha 1 is tan square alpha 1 plus 1. So from this we get sec square alpha 2 minus sec square alpha 1. 1 gets cancelled. So tan square alpha 2 minus tan square alpha 1. Okay. So this gives us the value of delta t. If you divide this by CA, this will give you the value of alpha t, or you just keep it multiplied by CP, and you will get the entire term. Okay. Now at the bottom of this degree of reaction, we have T3 minus T1, which is the overall work input. So CP T3 minus T1 will keep in terms of CP. Okay, H3 minus H1. UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1. Okay. So R can be now written as CP delta TA by CP delta TA plus CP delta TB, which is equal to UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1 minus half CA square tan square alpha 2 minus tan square alpha 1 by UCA tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha. Just algebraic calculation, you can do it on your own. Maybe if I am reading it, it looks difficult, but actually it's just very simple algebraic calculation. Okay. Automatically it will flow once you know how to calculate. So first term is 1, this divided by the denominator is 1. The second term, tan square alpha 2 minus tan square alpha 1, can be divided by tan alpha 2 minus tan alpha 1, and it will give us tan alpha 2 plus tan alpha 1. Okay. So ultimately we get R is equal to 1 minus CA by 2U tan alpha 1 plus tan alpha 2. Okay. So this is the value of degree of reaction in terms of the flow angles, alpha 1 and alpha 2. We can also write CA by U as flow coefficient phi, which we have previously defined. So you can write R as 1 minus phi by 2 tan alpha 1 plus tan alpha 2. Okay. Again, we can do some more algebraic calculation. Again, you don't have to remember, these things can be easily derived. Okay. If you can draw the velocity diagram correctly. I will just show you this for the sake of completeness. But this could have been given as a problem also. This is like a problem. So we have derived U is equal to CA tan alpha 1 plus tan beta 1 from the velocity diagram. Okay. On this velocity diagram, U is equal to CA tan alpha 1 plus CA tan beta 1. Okay. Also, U is equal to CA tan alpha 2 plus tan beta 2. Okay. So U by CA can be written as tan alpha 1 plus tan beta 1 or tan alpha 2 plus tan beta 2. Okay. So now we can replace this tan alpha 1 and tan alpha 2 using these relations. So tan alpha 1 we can replace by U by CA minus tan beta 1, and tan alpha 2 we can replace by U by CA minus tan beta 2. Okay. If you do this, you will get R is equal to 1 minus CA by 2U. You replace tan alpha 1 and tan alpha 2 by these relations, U by CA tan beta 1 minus tan beta 1 and U by CA minus tan beta 2. So you will get 2U by CA minus tan beta 1 minus tan beta 2. Okay. So after cancellation of the terms, final expression you will get for the degree of reaction in terms of the blade angles as R is equal to CA by 2U tan beta 1 plus tan beta 2. Okay. And CA by U we can write as flow coefficient also. So R is equal to phi by 2 tan beta 1 plus tan beta 2. So this is the significance of this degree of reaction, is that what I have already discussed. It gives us an idea about how much diffusion is occurring in the rotor as compared to the entire stage, rotor plus stator. Okay. Before taking the break, let me go through some limiting cases. Okay. So case 1 is R is half, which is the ideal case. R is half. Okay. So let me just keep this expression open. Oh, I don't have it here. Expression for degree of reaction open, so that we will be using it repeatedly. Okay. So for R is equal to half, put the value half here in place of R in this expression. So you get half is equal to Ca by 2U tan beta 1 plus tan beta 2. Okay. Or U by Ca is equal to tan beta 1 plus tan beta 2. Okay. This is what we are getting. U by Ca is equal to tan beta 1 plus tan beta 2. Remember previously also we had obtained another relation in the last class, that U by Ca is tan alpha 1 plus tan beta 1. Okay. So U by Ca is tan alpha 1 plus tan beta 1. This we have previously obtained, okay, from the velocity diagram, and this we are obtaining from degree of reaction. Okay. So using these two relations, you can see that beta 2 is equal to alpha 1. Okay. Beta 2 is equal to alpha 1. If you cancel tan beta 1, beta 2 is equal to alpha. Similarly, you should try this. Just don't directly write. I am writing it here because it's just similar. Alpha 2 is equal to beta 1. Okay. It means that the velocity diagram is symmetrical about the center line. Okay. What it means is that if you draw the velocity diagrams together, this alpha 1 is equal to beta 2 and this alpha 2 is equal to beta 1. So these two triangles look symmetrical, like a mirror image with respect to the center point. Okay. Alpha 2 is equal to beta 1 and alpha 1 is equal to beta 2. So this triangle is like it is getting this velocity triangle, inlet velocity triangle V1, U and C1. It is as if it is getting reflected along the center line. So it becomes V2, C2 and U. Okay. So from this we can also see that for this case C1 should be equal to V2 because it is symmetrical, and C2 should be equal to V1. Okay. C1 should be equal to V2 and C2 should be equal to V1. And this is also understandable. I have not done it here, but if you try to solve it, you will see that the diffusion is exactly equal for both the rotor and the stator. What is the diffusion in the stator in terms of velocity? What is the change in enthalpy in the static enthalpy in the stator in terms of velocity? H3 minus H2. How will I write? C2 square minus C1 square. And what about the rotor? H2 minus H1. C1 square.
Same.
Yes, because it will be V2 square, V1 square minus V2 square. Okay. And we will see that because V1 is equal to C2 and V2 is equal to C1, V1 square minus V2 square is equal to C2 square minus C1 square. So it is actually same. We can verify that we are getting the same diffusion in both the rotor and the stator. Okay. For R is equal to half. And this is the most useful case because the diffusions are, the burden of diffusion means you are going against the pressure gradient. Okay. So you want the diffusion to be as less as possible in both the rotor and stator. So here it is equally divided and this is the optimal case. In any other case, one of the parts, either rotor or stator, will have larger diffusion and have larger losses. Okay. But still, for the sake of completeness, let us see the two other limiting cases. R is equal to, which are not useful, which are useless cases, but still we will see. Okay, R is equal to 0 and R is equal to 1. R is equal to 0 means no diffusion in the rotor, only diffusion occurs in the stator. Okay. So from our equation, if we put R equal to 0, it gives us tan beta 1 equal plus tan beta 2 equal to 0. This expression. Okay. Or beta 1 is equal to minus beta 2. If you draw this diagram, it will look like this. Okay. So beta 1 should be equal to minus beta 2. Okay. It is symmetrical So about this beta 1 and beta 2 lines or the V2 and V1 lines are similar. So V1 is equal to V2. And what does it mean? V2 is equal to V1. What does it mean? What is the diffusion in the rotor if V2 is equal to V1?
Zero, no diffusion.
Zero.
No diffusion, no change in relative kinetic energy. V2 is equal to V1. And you can see then what is the diffusion in the stator. How much change is occurring from C1, sorry, from C2 you are going to C1 in the stator, right? Inlet is C2, outlet is C1. So the inlet velocity is huge for the stator as compared to say these cases where C2 is not very large. Here the C2 will be very large for the same CA and U. C2 will be very large because of this, and the frictional losses will be huge. Okay, so this is not a very ideal situation. Okay, so this type of compressor is known as impulse type, where all the burden of diffusion is on the stator. All static pressure rise occurs in the stator. Passage area remains same for the rotor blades at the inlet and outlet because it is not acting like a diffuser. Okay, this is not practical. That because we can see here that C2 is so large, it will lead to huge losses. It's not practical. Similarly, you can also check for R equal to 1, the other limiting case. If you use this equation R equal to 1 equal to 1 minus this term, so 1 gets cancelled. So tan alpha 1 plus tan alpha 2 will be equal to 0, or alpha 1 will be equal to minus alpha 2. Entire burden of this is even worse. Entire burden of diffusion is on rotor. Rotor anyway is increasing the kinetic energy, and again the burden of diffusion is on the rotor. Okay, stator is doing nothing, so it is just changing the direction. Okay, so this is not a very good situation. Stator should do some diffusion, right? It should act like a diffuser. It's not there just to change the direction. So R equal to 1 is not a very good case, very good situation. Okay, and again still it is not practical. In this case, you will see that V2 and V1 there will be a huge difference between V2 and you should draw this velocity diagram for this. Maybe I will give it in the exam. And C1 and C2 will remain equal. Okay, no change in C1 and C2. Only change occurs in V1 and V2, and there is a huge change, which is not practical. Okay, so ultimately the conclusion from this discussion about degree of reaction is that R is equal to half is most attractive because of most efficient diffusion. Okay, because diffusion is equally divided between the two parts. We'll finish this part. Okay, we'll finish this part with a small discussion. It's not necessary. It is part of the problems, but just give you some tips about how to solve some problems. Okay, it's not part of any theory or anything. But in the problems, what we see in many cases is that inlet conditions are generally given and some mass flow rate or some parameters are given depending on the problem. Okay, so I wanted to let you know how to calculate the different things if some parameters at the inlet section is given. Okay, whatever we have discussed till now, we have discussed with respect to a single stage. And single stage means with respect to blade diagram, blade velocity, change in velocity in the rotor, change in velocity in the stator, pressure ratio, work input, degree of reaction. So the important, if we can summarize what we have learned in axial compressors, if you read again, you will see that we have learned about what is the work input in a stage, what is the change in static and stagnation temperature in a rotor, what is the change in static and stagnation temperature in the stator, what are the changes in velocities in the rotor and stator, relative and absolute velocities. Then what is the change in temperature, stagnation pressure in the overall pressure ratio in that stage. And after that, we have gone through some minor parameters like work done factor, de Holler's criteria, and degree of reaction. Okay, so to try to understand the design of an axial compressor in a better way. Okay. But sometimes the when designing, you will have a certain mass flow rate at the inlet. Okay, you know the overall mass flow rate in the cycle, and you have a certain design parameter like the value of CA is fixed based on some Mach number, and blade velocity may be fixed, U may be fixed. Okay, based on rotational speed, and we need to calculate the other parameters. Okay, so how those are done, that let us have a quick discussion. Okay. So generally on the upstream side of an axial compressor, you will know the overall temperature and pressure from the diffuser or from the inlet. If it is ambient, there is no diffuser. T01 is equal to TA, ambient temperature, and P01 equal to PA, ambient pressure. Generally, T01 and P01 are known. And CA is a fixed parameter based on design. What is the maximum limit of CA to keep it the flow below subsonic region? Okay. U also can be calculated if N is given, or maximum value of U can be taken for design from centrifugal stresses. So if it is not given, if it's just a problem, if N is given, you can calculate U as at any radius R, it can be calculated as 2 pi R into N, where N is rotations per second. Okay, if it is given as rotations per minute, RPM, you have to use 2 pi Rn by 60. And if omega is given, it is just omega into R. So at the mean radius, U mean will be 2 pi R mean into N. Okay. So now to calculate relate the mass flow rate, okay, we need to calculate so mass flow rate depends on, or if mass flow rate is given, the area actually depends on the mass flow rate, or if the area is given, mass flow rate depends on the area. Okay, so these things we want to relate. What is the area? So area is defined in terms of this annular space. Okay, what is the annular space? This root, this blade root, the blade where it is joined at the hub or at the shaft. So over the shaft there is a hub. So where the blade is starting is known as blade root. Okay, it is the lowest point of the blade. Highest point of the blade is the tip. Okay, so the annular area, annular passage area, if you can see, annular passage area for this flow is pi r tip square, means pi r t square, tip radius, minus pi r root square. So annular area is the area of the outer circle minus the inner circle. Okay, pi r tip square minus pi r root square. This is the flow area, and this flow area keeps on decreasing. So for the first stage, this is pi r tip square for the first stage minus pi r root square for the first stage. Okay, it should be clear to you. Okay. So to find this or relate this, we first need to find out the density, because mass flow rate is given in terms of density as m dot is equal to rho 1. At the inlet, density is rho 1. So rho 1 C1, or not C1, sorry, CA, rho 1, because it's in the axial direction we have to consider. Rho 1 CA, and what else is there? Area A1. Okay, rho 1 A1 CA. So mass flow rate is density at the inlet into the flow component along the axial direction, means perpendicular to the flow area, multiplied by the flow area. Rho 1 CA into flow area pi RT square minus R1 square. So this is the relation of mass flow rate with density, axial flow velocity, and flow area. So if mass flow rate is given, we should be on some other information will be given, rotor tip diameter or root diameter, or if rotor tip and root diameters are given, we can calculate the mass flow rate. Okay, CA can be calculated even if it is not given. From other parameters, CA can be calculated, or some information will be given for CA from which C1 can be calculated. So some relation will be known. Okay, because everything cannot be unknown. So either alpha 1 or C1, something will be known. Okay, if CA and alpha 1 is known, you can calculate C1 from the velocity diagram. If C1 and alpha 1 is known, you can calculate CA from the velocity diagram. Remember, CA is what? CA is C1 cos alpha 1. Okay. So now to find the density is not straightforward. Means directly you cannot find it, because you need to find the static temperature and pressure. And the stagnation temperature and pressure are known. So static temperature at this point can be calculated from the stagnation temperature, similar to our centrifugal case, okay, by using T1 equal to T01 minus C1 square by 2Cp. Once you calculate the static temperature, you can calculate the static pressure using the isentropic relation P1 by P01 is equal to T1 by T01 to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. So once static temperature and static pressure are known, you can calculate the density rho 1 by using rho 1 equal to P1 by RT1, and then use the density in this relation. Okay. So where RT and RR are the blade radius and the tip and root. So this is no particular theory. This is just some tips for how to solve problems if you face something. So the problem may not be exactly in the same format. Means something may be known, something may not be known, but this relation holds true. Means T1 and T01 are related like this, P1 and P01 are related like this. Rho 1 has to be calculated like this in case it is unknown, and mass flow rate and density and area are related like this. Okay. So I will take a break here, and we will continue this discussion after the break. And so this is about axial compressor. This is about the compressors in general. So we have two parts in the compressor, centrifugal and axial, and we have gone through the all the basics of centrifugal and axial compressor, how the blade diagrams look like, how the blade velocities look like, and how to calculate the most important parameter, which is the rise in pressure, and some additional things like how the inlet flow is calculated for the centrifugal compressor, things like that. For the axial compressor, what is the degree of reaction, and other parameters, important parameters, everything we have covered. Okay. Only thing that I'm not discussing here are the problems. So you go through today you can go through these problems. And in the next class, I will try to find some additional problems if they are suitable problems, because in the book there are problems which are not suitable for our course.
Sir, that mass flow rate is in first stage in the inlet
Yes.
and outlet is constant. So that from that, if we know last stage tip and root diameter also,
Yes.
then we can find that sir density from that relation.
It should be possible, yes. But in actual case, it will be opposite. Means you will be able to calculate the density because you have to calculate the pressure ratio.
Temperature and pressure will be known.
Pressure and density, and then you have to then design for the actual tip and root diameter. Is the opposite way. You will be designing the tip and root diameter for the second stage, third stage, every stage based on the temperature, pressure, and density. Keeping
But
CA.
in inlet we have no CA, but at outlet the CA, what should be that?
No, CA is always there. CA is the axial component of velocity. This is this vertical line. Okay, it's not clear here. CA is equal to this vertical line.
It
It
will
is
be
always
same
there.
for first stage and last stage.
CA is always same for first stage, rotor, stator. It is not changing. This vertical line. It is the component of velocity along the axial direction, along the flow direction, along the direction of the axis. It is the component of velocity along this direction. Now C1, C2, all this can be different, but CA is remain same. Okay. By design, CA is kept same. So this, okay. So even if there is no inlet guide vane, C1 will become equal to CA. If there is inlet guide vane, C1 will be defined, but CA is always kept constant. So once you know CA, it's a very good question that you have raised. If CA is known by design, how actually we proceed in designing is not that we know already the area. For first stage, we will calculate at the exit what is the new pressure and temperature, okay, and the new density. So this will be the inlet for the second stage rotor, the temperature, pressure, and density. And mass flow rate is obviously constant. Mass flow rate cannot change. So based on mass flow rate and density and value of CA, you have to calculate what is
tip
the
and root.
yes. So actually tip and root radius, two unknowns are there, but one relation is there only based on mass flow rate. So you have to assume some other things, like you can keep the tip diameters to be constant or root diameters to be constant and change the tip diameter. Or if you just keep the tip diameters constant and change the root diameter, or keep the ratio fixed, some other relation needs to be kept so that you can calculate both tip and root diameter. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Very good question. So go through these problems for the centrifugal compressor in the problem set 4, problem 1. I have uploaded this already. Okay, if you have to, for this exam, you have to go through problem set 2, problem set 3 and 3A, problem set 4, and problem set 5. 5 I will upload by the end of this weekend. Okay, so lot of problems actually are there this time.
Sir,
Problems. Yes.
Sir, the exam time is similar, 2 hours. So,
2
sir,
hours they have given. Yes.
so the question full marks will be what, sir?
60 marks.
Because 60 marks.
Yes.
Okay.
I will equally divide between the midterm and final. Okay.
And the
Uh,
percentage of end term for this GTJP
equal,
and
equal, 40%, 40%.
40%. Okay.
You can expect lot of small questions this time. Lot of small questions. I am thinking of slightly different type of question pattern. I have not yet said the question. It may change also, but to give you some suggestion, you can expect lot of small questions. Small question means understanding type of question. Why blades are twisted? Why this number of, like I had given in the previous example, why the number of stages is less in the in case of turbines? Why this happens? Why that happens? This type of, and you should answer in very short, 1 or 2 lines or 3 lines. Don't go with very unless I say explain. If I say state what happens or why this happens, just write 1 or 2 lines. If I say explain why this happens, then you can explain, and it will be clear from the marks also. If say it is a 2 marks question, it means that it will be 1-2 line answer. Okay, 1 marks, 2 marks question. If it is a 4 marks question, it means that you have to explain somewhat. Okay, so from the marks also it will be clear. And there may be some diagrams and 1 or 2 problems or more problems also can be there, short problems. I have to decide what to do. Okay, but because marks is so less, we cannot obviously give very large problems, because generally I like to give a design problem on turbofan or turboprop like this, which has 30-40 marks, because these are long problems. If you see the problem set 2, or if you see the problems that I have given you from El Sayed Ahmed, suggested problems, you will see that the turbofan problems will take 1.5 hours to solve, because those are very long. Okay, 7-8 pages long. So those will not be, may not be possible in this exam, but still you should know all the details of turbofan, because I can develop small problems from there, only about the diffuser or only about one part or some tricky problems. Okay, but please go through this problem set 4. 2 problems are there on the centrifugal compressor and 2 on the axial flow compressor. Due to lack of time, I am not solving any problem in the class, but I will suggest some problem, additional problems in the next class if possible. But otherwise also these 2 problems will give you, 4 problems will give you a lot of idea about the work done factor and things like that, pressure ratio calculation, everything is there. Okay, after this class you can go through this. Instead of discussing in the class, I am giving them as assignment problems. Assignment, but you don't have to submit. All these are assignment problems, but you don't have to submit. But it is supposed that you will be solving them as an assignment. Problems at 2, 3, 3A and 4 and 5. Okay. So this time lot of practice, and even I have given some around 10 problems. Each of them will take a lot of time to solve from El Sayed Ahmed. I will try to find out some good problems for the compressor and the compressor means both axial and centrifugal, as well as the turbines from the book of El Sayed Ahmed, if there are suitable problems, because those are some advanced problems, may not be suitable. At least 3-4 problems if I can find, I will suggest for more practice. These are very important because this will be helpful for you for long term, for campus selection or other activities. Let us take a break, and then I will briefly start discussing about the combustion chamber. Okay, the theory of combustion chamber. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, we'll continue the discussion. And for these combustion chambers, there is not much calculations actually. It is more about descriptive. The nature of the topic is more descriptive. So we will go through all the important aspects of combustion chamber through slides. Okay, and see one minor problem towards the end. We already know. So I hope you can see the slides also. These are already shared with you in the Teams portal. Okay, in the beginning of the course, I have shared the slides. Should be there, so you can go through the slides and learn on your own also. But we will go through it in detail. Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we know that between the compressor and the turbine, there exists the combustion chamber, and this is needed to increase the enthalpy of the fluid by adding heat by burning some aviation fuel. Okay, and this is required because this heat addition is required. Otherwise, you will not be able to get any work output or any thrust. So, work output in case of industrial gas turbines or thrust in case of jet engines. If you do not add any heat to the cycle. Okay, so without any heat addition, if you draw the TS diagram, you will see that the compression for the compressor and the expansion for the turbine coincide. Those lines coincide, and as a result, there is no change in, no difference in work input and work output. Okay, both are same, so no net work output. But if you add the heat, you will see that the expansion line goes towards the right hand side, means the expansion of the turbine goes towards the right hand side. So for the same pressure ratio, we get a larger temperature and enthalpy difference. As a result, the turbine work output for the same pressure ratio is more than the compressor work input, and we get from net work output. Okay, now that net work output can be used for electricity or power generation, or it can be the entire work output need not be taken out from the turbine by using the turbine. Some of it can be used for generating high kinetic energy in the nozzle and like for jet engines. Okay, so combustion chamber is one of the, out of the three, there are three essential parts for industrial gas turbine and 5 essential parts for the jet engine. So for jet engine, these are the diffuser, the compressor, the combustion chamber, turbine, and the nozzle. Okay, so it is an integral part. Now we will take a look at how it works. Okay, so you have a combustion chamber. These are some schematic diagrams of combustion chambers. Okay, these are from old pictures, and you will see a lot of holes and other things which we will discuss later. Means the air is not injected at a certain, all the air is not injected at the same point at the inlet. It is divided into parts and gradually injected through different holes. We will discuss later. But this is how a typical combustion chamber, cut section of a combustion chamber looks like. Okay, and depending on the design, you can have large number of, say 10, 12 combustion chambers surrounding the shaft at the center. Okay, so they are arranged radially, circumferentially, sorry, around the center. Okay, or there can be just an annular region which has the full annular region is the combustion chamber where the combustion process occurs. So all this we will discuss. So after combustion, you know that the temperature increases to a very high level, but the pressure remains same for ideal cases, and in actual cases there are some pressure losses also. So I will go through some points. It may look somewhat dry or boring, but I will just quickly go through them. But these are there in the slide. You can read about them later also. Okay, but these points are important, so I have written there. So combustion systems for jet engines are direct fired air heater, means directly you are having the combustion process. It is not unlike say external combustion, okay, and occurs between the compressor and turbine. Continuous process. This is a continuous process. It is started by an electric spark and is self-sustaining. It keeps on. If sometimes suddenly say the flame goes out, it can happen mid-flight. Your jet engine is flying and there is sometimes flame out. It is called as flame out. The ignition suddenly stops. You can again reignite. Okay, so using the igniter. So it does not mean that it stops and you cannot again start. Okay. And we know that we have discussed this extensively many times that combustion design is limited by turbine inlet temperature. Means the maximum temperature that can be attained in the combustion chamber. Means theoretically we could have attained much higher temperature, but because of the turbine material we keep it to a certain limit, say 1200 to 1400 degrees centigrade nowadays. Previously it was 500 600 degrees centigrade. Every year it is increasing slightly because of more advancements in material design, in manufacturing technique. So there are a lot of improved manufacturing techniques which leads to higher strength of the material. There are a lot of improved materials. Each company has their own material. They guard them very secretly and do not release the details also, like what is the composition of their material. These are known as super alloys, and for the turbine blades I am saying we will discuss at the end class. And also depends on cooling effect. Okay, so ultimately combustion is limited by the turbine inlet temperature, and this temperature for the combustion chamber can be controlled by the fuel air ratio. That also we already know. By increasing the amount of air you can reduce the temperature. Okay, by diluting the mixture you can reduce the temperature. If you have stoichiometric mixture, it would have led to very large temperature around 2400 Kelvin, which is not sustainable. Then one additional combustion chamber or type of combustion chamber may be present, which we have discussed briefly, which is known as afterburner, which is after the turbine. Here you can go to very high temperature because there is no subsequent turbine stages. So only limit is the limit of the material of the nozzle, and nozzles can sustain very large temperature. Okay. So again, some dry points may look boring, but again these are important. So quickly I will just read them out. What are the main requirements of the combustion chamber? So dimensions, while designing the combustion chamber, the dimensions have to be calculated specifically, keeping in mind what is the space available, and this space is determined by the overall, say, cross-sectional area of the compressor and the turbine, overall casing. Those things limit the dimensions. Okay, and then we have to also find out what is the stable range of operation for different air-fuel ratio. Ideally, we design with a certain air-fuel ratio, right? Say air-fuel ratio is 40 or 50 like this. But in real life, the air, because of change in flight velocity, the air intake velocity also changes. So airflow rate changes. So air-fuel ratio will change in real life. So for a range of air-fuel ratio, it has to operate. So you have to design in such a way that the combustion chamber is still can sustain the flame at a range of air-fuel ratio, not only at a particular air-fuel ratio. Then there is a diffuser section in the combustion chamber. This is not the initial diffuser before the compressor. This is this diffuser. Okay, like say if this is the inlet. From this side the inlet is occurring. So the flow velocity is reduced even further. You can see flow velocity is reduced even further. So it should not have too much pressure losses. Okay, velocity has to be reduced to sustain the flame, which we have discussed. Otherwise the flame will go out with the flow. Okay, but it should not, we cannot induce too much turbulence to reduce the velocity because it will lead to large pressure loss. We should have also high combustion efficiency at different operating conditions, and these are other standard points. Durability, relighting capability is what I was mentioning. If the flame just stops out, we have to again reignite. Okay, reliable and smooth ignition when during starting and flame out. Less pollution should be there. We should avoid the formation of carbon deposits. Okay, like soot particles. This is generally not formed because of very high air fuel ratio. All the carbon tends to get oxidized. Okay, because so much oxygen is available. So chances of forming are less, but still it is a design parameter. And the outlet temperature distribution is tailored towards maximum life of the turbine blades. Means distribution, not only the maximum temperature, the overall distribution at the outlet, means what is at the hub section, at the tip section of the turbine blades, like this. So the distribution has to be carefully calculated nowadays, so that you get maximum turbine blade life, okay, depending on the stresses. So now we come to the important part, which is the how this works, how the combustion chamber works, okay. What is the time? Still time is there. Attendance I will take based on the downloaded list. So you have at the inlet, the areas increases, okay, for the combustion chamber. So we have not yet discussed. So let us consider that there are multiple combustion chambers like this arranged around the periphery of the shaft, okay, and we will consider one of them. So the entire flow gets divided into say 8 combustion chambers, and one of them we are just looking at here, okay. So you have a diffuser section which slows down the flow. The fuel comes from a separate site, okay, it's known as fuel injector. There will be a fuel pump which will inject the fuel at high pressure. The fuel will come at very high pressure. The fuel pump will inject it at high pressure. Then it is not clear here. I think I have another diagram. Okay, we will go to that. Okay, let me just explain the parts here. Okay, so we have some covering here which is known as the spout, and there is another section which induces turbulence, rotates the flow, which is known as solder. Again, these designs may vary depending on the actual engine for different companies. There is an igniter which ignites the flow. Then there is a liner. Okay, liner means it's a container which has a lot of holes inside it, through which the air flows, and the flame is contained within this container, okay, within this liner, so that it does not go out and destroy the combustion chamber wall, okay. And these holes are known as primary, intermediate, and dilution holes, depending on how the airflow comes. I will discuss this in more details in the next slide. Through this slide, it is more clear. Okay, same diagram. Okay, but now let us look at this. So fuel is coming from the fuel injector at a high pressure. The air which is coming from the, so from where is the air coming? It is coming from the compressor. Okay, it is coming at a very high pressure from the compressor. It is now divided into different parts. Okay, so one part, a small amount. Okay, it is given here. Percentages are typical percentages are given here. So around say 20% enters directly from here. Okay, although it looks like it is obstructed, actually it can mix with the fuel. Okay, so it enters here and mixes with the fuel and directly goes inside with the fuel, that 20% here. Okay, why this is small amount is kept here? Can anyone say why we keep this amount of air small with the fuel initially?
Rich mixing, I think.
Yes.
For rich mixing. Okay.
Or rich mixing. So what will be the advantage of rich mixing? If it is not rich, what will happen? If I inject 100% air, flame will go out. Okay, means you will not be able to sustain the flame, because you will not be able to reach high temperature at this location. And so here you try to keep near to the stoichiometric ratio. Okay, so that the fuel air ratio is quite near to the stoichiometric ratio, so that it is easier to combust. Okay, but the temperature will be quite high in this local region. So only small percentage is taken from here. The rest of it again is entered first through some channels which are known as primary channels. Okay, this is also primary channel. These are also primary channels. So all these are known as primary air. So around 40% of the air is primary air, which takes part in direct combustion. The air which is coming from here and the air which comes to the primary channel. So this 40% air takes part in direct combustion. After this, the rest of the air comes in through different holes like this. Okay, different holes like this, which are known as intermediate hole, dilution holes. Different terms are there. Intermediate air, dilution air, things like that. So the only function of that air is that to reduce the mixture temperature. Okay, to dilute, keep on diluting the combustion products, so that the temperature goes down and down. Okay, and it comes out from the outside of the liner. You can see the liner here. This inner cylinder is the liner, and the holes are there. These are the dilution air holes, secondary air holes. These are the secondary air holes. Okay, and there will be some primary air holes here, okay, and primary air which comes in, and the flow comes in. It's not very clear here. Fuel nozzle spray is there, okay, and through this snout the flow comes in, primary airflow, okay, and there is a swirler or like devices which rotates the flow so that turbulence is generated, okay. And then all of the air actually comes in ultimately. So like at the end, no air goes outside the casing, outside the liner. Everything comes within the liner, and when it goes out at a lower temperature. Okay, so this is how the combustion chamber operates. So now, depending on these designs, there are different types of designs for combustion systems. Okay. So there are three main types of designs. These are known as can type or tubular, then cannular and annular. Okay, let me quickly explain these three types of design. Can type design or cannular. In this type of design, you have separate combustion chambers. Okay, totally separate combustion chambers. Each of these combustion chamber is separate for and there may be 8 to 10 combustion chambers surrounding the shaft. Okay. They have their own igniters, they have their own liners and own secondary primary holes, own fuel injectors. Everything is separate. Okay. Then the second type is known as cannular. Okay. Where the casing is annular. Okay. Casing is annular, but the liners, you have separate liners, separate fuel injectors and separate combustion mechanism, separate combustion in each of this within this liner. But the secondary airs can flow between the annular region and mix within the annular region. Okay. One advantage is that if the flame goes out in one of these, it can be quickly ignited in the other part. There are other advantages which we will discuss subsequently. Okay. And material cost is also reduced. Design is also because you don't have separate combustion chambers for each of them. And the third one, which is known as annular type, here you don't even have separate liners. You have one annular section. Annular liners will also be present, and only fuel injection at different spots. Okay, around this annular region. So the entire combustion chamber is a single combustion chamber, annular combustion chamber, and fuel injection occurs over the entire combustion chamber. Okay. Then we can have supersonic combustion, which we will briefly discuss toward the end. Okay. But these are the three types: annular, cannular, and like they have been used. Various types have been used for various applications. Okay. There are some more pictures which I have shown here to actually you can understand how the. So this is the first type, can type, tubular. All the combustion chambers are separated. Okay. They have their own separate fuel injectors, separate, everything is separate, okay, igniters. This is the cannular one. You can see that the casing is same, but the liners are different, okay, liners are different with their secondary and primary holes, okay, and otherwise it is similar. And this is the annular one, okay. You can read about this more from the book if you want. More details are present in the book of El Sayed Ahmed. Or just for the sake of curiosity, you can read more. So here you don't even have separate liners. You have the casing, inner and outer casing, and then annular liners also. You can see here two liners, okay, inside and outside. And the entire combustion occurs. Multiple injection points are there, so that combustion is occurs smoothly around the periphery. Okay. So what is the time? Some time is there. Let us continue. We will not actually solve these calculations. I am just giving some example, but it's not part of the course, or we will not solve this, do these calculations or solve any problems. But a lot of chemistry is involved for calculating the reaction rate. Okay, and reaction rate is a function of temperature. At high temperature, reaction is much faster. Okay. And it's also a function of pressure as shown here and function of temperature so if you depending on the temperature your reaction rate will be higher, and you already know this equation means typical reaction equation for hydrocarbons. Okay, so this reaction rate calculations we will not do, but this type of calculation you can assume that it may come in the exam, or you should be able to do. Just calculating what is the air amount of air required or air fuel ratio for a certain amount of, or for a certain hydrocarbon. Okay, so I will discuss this in more detail. So before going to that, let us take a look at the reaction rate. Reaction rate is proportional to some value of pressure, some function of pressure into some function of temperature. And actually it is a strong function of temperature. It varies exponentially. So if the temperature increases, reaction will increase drastically. Okay, because this is in the denominator. At low temperature you cannot sustain the reaction. Okay, so that's why also you need initial part, very high temperature is needed, stoichiometric ratio, to sustain the reaction. Then you can dilute the mixture once the primary reaction has occurred. So for any hydrocarbon, CaHb, like it can be say for example octane, although octane is not used for aviation or gas turbine, if it is C8H18, you should be able to calculate what is the amount of oxygen and nitrogen that are present, okay, for stoichiometric combustion. So for 8 atoms of carbon, you will have 8 O2, and for 18 atoms of hydrogen, you will have 18 by 4 O2, okay. So as to generate A into CO2, so 8 CO2 plus 18 by 4 H2O, and accordingly you can also get the amount of nitrogen, okay. So we will take, instead of 3.773, actually I should change it here. Typically we take 3.76, nitrogen to be 3.76, okay. So I have given a problem, or in the problem sheet, where I think I have taken 3.76. It does not matter, these are small changes, but it is better to stick to some format, okay. So we take the composition of air as 1 molecule of O2 has 3.76 molecules of nitrogen in air, okay. So this is from the book I have taken, so it shows a different value. We will define something called a equivalence ratio, okay. So this equivalence ratio is the actual fuel air mixture. How will you calculate the actual fuel air mixture? Fuel air ratio, sorry. How will you calculate the actual fuel air ratio in the combustion chamber?
So by energy balance.
By energy balance, right? We have done it so many times for all these problems. By energy balance and the outlet and inlet temperature. Using the outlet and inlet temperature, we can find out what is the air fuel ratio. Okay, actual. And the stoichiometric air fuel ratio, fuel air ratio, how will you calculate? Stoichiometric means for exact amount of air is present for the reaction. Exact amount of air is present for the reaction. How will you calculate?
It will balance that equation, and then
from this equation you can find out what is the amount of oxygen and nitrogen present. So that is the amount of air, mass of air, and mass of fuel you can find from this equation, okay, for this equation, a stoichiometric condition. So equivalence ratio, one term can be defined as ratio of the fuel air actual by stoichiometric. Let's finish this. Fuel air actual by fuel air stoichiometric. Please switch off your mic. And for lean mixtures, amount of fuel is less, so fuel air ratio will be lesser than the stoichiometric, which is the case for gas turbines and jet engines. So equivalence ratio is much less than 1. Okay. So typically stoichiometric fuel air ratio or air fuel ratio, if I say, is around between 10 and 20, but actual air fuel ratio is between 40 to 50. So the opposite, fuel air ratio will be very small for the actual case as compared to stoichiometric case. So 5 will be less than 1. So this is actually the case. We have very fuel lean mixtures in our cases. Okay, equivalence ratio is less than 1. But as a theory, we can also know what are the equivalence ratio equal to 1 and greater than 1. When we have stoichiometric mixture, actual mixture is also stoichiometric. We have equivalence ratio 1. When the actual mixture is rich, which we should not use for gas turbine, equivalence ratio is greater than 1. Okay. So this only for this calculation, we have some calculation for the combustion chamber, and we will finish this class with that. Okay, I will just introduce the problem and we will continue this discussion in the next class. It is uploaded in the portal. Okay, just go through it. This is very simple, intuitive calculation. Okay, you should be able to do. So I have given a problem. So for the combustion systems, you should just go through the slides, and if you want, you can read the book also. But in the slides and recording, everything should be there. I will upload all the recordings by tonight. Students have requested multiple times. So I have downloaded them. It's taking some time to download. Then I will upload it. Depends on the internet connection speed. So a gas turbine uses octane. Actually, it will not be the case. Gas turbine fuel is typically very near to kerosene. Okay, fuel is very near to kerosene. Aviation fuel is very near to kerosene. But say it uses octane, C8H18 as fuel. The inlet only. So just to digress here, only for scramjet and ramjet or scramjet engines, pure hydrogen has also been tried as fuel. Okay. So the problem states that a gas turbine uses octane as fuel, and the inlet and outlet temperatures are known. T01 is 650 Kelvin, inlet outlet from the combustion chamber, and T02, which is limited by the turbine inlet temperature, is 1600 Kelvin. The other data are also known. This we are familiar with this data by now. Calorific value is given. Cp at the inlet of the combustion chamber is given 1.005 kJ per kg Kelvin. And Cp at the exit of the combustion chamber is given for the hot mixture is 1.23. It is given as 1.23 in this case, kilojoule per kg Kelvin. We need to find the equivalence ratio. Just now we have defined the equivalence ratio, so we need to find that. So very simple problem. How will you proceed? I will just quickly outline. You go through it and try to solve it. For any other case, you try to take say propane C3H8 and try to solve and find the same problem. Do the same, or you take hydrogen and try to solve the same problem. Any hydrocarbon you take and try to solve the same problem in a similar way. So C8H18. So from balance of the number of molecules, you can say that 8 molecules of oxygen are required to generate 8 CO2 molecules, and 18/4 molecules of oxygen are required to generate 9 H2O. Okay, for complete stoichiometric combustion. 8 CO2 plus 9 H2O. So it means that the amount of oxygen molecules required is 8 plus 18/4. Okay, 12.5. So it means the amount of nitrogen is present in the air, which is equal to 12.5 into 3.76, which comes as 47. Okay. So this is the complete reaction. You should show the steps also, how you get the 8 and 18/4. Okay. So now fuel air ratio for the stoichiometric mixture can be found as mass flow rate of fuel by mass flow rate of air. What is the mass flow rate of fuel? Mass of fuel. For one molecule, mass of fuel is 12 into 8. 12 for each carbon, 12 into 8. 8 carbon atoms are there. Plus 1 into 18. 1 is for the hydrogen into 18 for 18 atoms of hydrogen. So 100, and I think it is 96 plus 18, 114. Okay. So this fuel has a molecular mass of 114. For the one molecule of or 1 mole of fuel, what is the mass of air? It is 8 plus 18/4, 12.5 into 32, which is the mass of oxygen, plus 47 into 28, which is for nitrogen. Okay, so this will give us some value. If you calculate this, you get the fuel air stoichiometric ratio, which is 0.06643. You can also get the air fuel ratio. Air fuel ratio will be, let us see what is the air fuel ratio just briefly, get an understanding. Because these are realistic values. 15.05. Okay, air fuel ratio is 15. So it will be between 10 and 20. It's around 15.05 in this case. For the stoichiometric case. For the actual case, we know how to derive. Okay, by energy balance, we know that fuel air ratio, I am not going through the details, can be written as CPH, T, like outlet temperature, minus CPC, inlet temperature, T01, divided by eta B, combustion efficiency, which is not given. I am assuming it to be 1. Eta B into QCV minus CPH T02. Okay. This you have done multiple times. You have done also before the exam. So this is very familiar to you. So from that energy balance, we get fuel air ratio as 0.032199. Okay. So now the by definition equivalence ratio is 0.03299 by 0.06443, which is 0.4847. Means it is a very lean mixture. It's a very lean mixture, much less than 1. This type of problems you should be able to solve for any hydrocarbon, any fuel. Okay, like if the fuel, and I have given in the, you go through the assignment problem also. Somewhat more elaborate problem is given in the assignment. One problem is there. Problem 3. Problem 4 and 5 are for the axial compressor. So problem 3 is for octane, but it has some slightly modified version. Okay, you just go through it and try to solve it to try to understand how to calculate the energy balance. So here actually I have asked for what is the temperature rise that is occurring. It will give you an idea. So please solve these problems: compressor, axial and centrifugal compressors, and the combustion chamber. So for combustion chamber, this is the only type of problems. We have some more theory which we will discuss in tomorrow's class. But this is the only type of problems. Please discuss these things, and sorry, not discuss. Please practice these things, and so that you know if you have any difficulties in going through it. I will suggest some more problems in tomorrow's class. Okay. We will stop here. I will take the attendance directly. Attendance sheet. Okay, so any questions? Attendance is downloaded. Any questions? What is